Heavenly Father, we give you thanks and praise for today. Thanks for bringing us together today as we look forward to, Lord, the opportunity that we have before us to walk where Jesus walked and to see the pages of the Bible become alive through the land and the places that we'll see. So we just ask that your blessing upon us, watch over us as we study. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so we're on page 42 in the regional study guide, and then we're still on the Galilee map, GAL map, as well. We just finished marking some things at the end of last time we were together, and so we're going to just continue working on that to finish up this section before we move on into our next unit today. So we're going to get Gomer. If you remember, and can find on your map, Megiddo. That was just on the edge of the Carmel mountain range. You had the different passes that came through, the different armies that came through that area. It sits kind of in the Jezreel Valley, just on the edge of the Jezreel Valley, right around that eastern route on the Jezreel Valley here, as you look at the Jezreel Valley in there. So that's where we're orientating ourselves from last week as we looked at that. Megiddo really controlled both the northern and southern passes in the midst of that. It was just a few miles from each one of where those places came out. So we're on page 42, an overview from Megiddo. So we're just going to look at some of these things that happened in this area. So our study of the Galilee map is not complete without a brief overview of the Jezreel Valley and the main events which happened in and around it. To gain a better perspective, we climb the hill of Megiddo and walk by its ancient fortifications to reach its summit and a marvelous overview of the valley. No other region in this land between compares with the Jezreel Valley, and few views of the valley compare with that with what can be seen from the hill of Megiddo. The term Har Megiddo in Hebrew appears in its Greek form in an apocalyptic passage which startles all who hear it. The kings of the whole world gather their forces for battle at a place which is called, in Hebrew, Armageddon, the hill of Megiddo, on which we now stand. As you explore the Galilee map, find, not highlight, so we're not highlighting these things, we're just finding them, features whose names would appear in bold. The Jezreel Valley is clearly outlined on the Galilee map. Some have compared it to a bird in flight with its beak pointing northwest towards Mount Carmel, right? This would be its wings here, its beak here. Others see it as the point of a broken arrow, leaving only the remnants of the arrowhead. No matter how one views the valley, it remains the classic battleground of history. With our Galilee map in hand, we are ready to survey the biblical scenes before us. So northwest, so we're looking here, north and west. This is Mount Carmel and the Kishon Pass. You see where that road, where these two hilly areas come together. Just north of north of Megiddo, if you follow the road as you're going up towards Tiaco that we had highlighted up there. We see the uplifted limestone summit of Mount Carmel, towering above the Jokneam Pass and halfway between Samaria and Phoenicia. Today, the Carmelite Muraka Monastery occupies its southern summit, the traditional site of the prophet Elijah's contest with the Jezreel's prophets of Baal. So you see with that monastery, if you follow Mount Carmel down, just south of the L in Carmel is that that monastery that they're talking about. Okay. The tradition. So you don't need to highlight those things at all, but if you don't need to, but just find those. The traditional site of Elijah's contest with Jezebel's prophets of Baal. The actual site may well have been on a small plateau below the monastery by the M of 474 meters. Since following the contest, Elijah asked his servant to ascend to the summit and look toward the sea, seen from the terrace of the monastery. The surging Nahal streambed of Kishon leaves the valley along Carmel's steep eastern slopes. Far below the monastery, somewhere along the Nahal Kishon, the prophets of Baal met their deaths, right? They were taken down and then slaughtered in that valley below. Mount Carmel with its forested slopes and deep canyons also served as a retreat for Elijah and Elisha. Amos the prophet clearly knew the position of Mount Carmel when he wrote, Though they hide on the top of Mount Carmel, though they hide in the depths of the nearby sea, this ridge was one of the major landmarks in the country, both from land and by sea. Early Egyptians referred to it as the antelope's nose. So it sticks out and into the sea there. And centuries later, an Assyrian king erected a victory monument on its slopes. So that's Mount Carmel and the Kishon Pass. We were able to go there last time, so I'm hoping we can do that again. That was really neat to be there, as we were kind of right on that. Just below, there's a little spot on the mountain, just kind of a plateau right there below the monastery that we went to. All right. Northeast, the Nazareth Ridge and Mount Tabor. So if you're looking here, this is Nazareth Ridge here. In Mount Tabor, we circled in green and a dashed green line before. So if you find Mount Tabor, it's that dashed green circle. And Nazareth Ridge then goes to the left of that brown part that contrasts with the valley below. That's called Nazareth Ridge. So that's where we're looking here. To the northeast of Megiddo, on a clear day, the long Nazareth Ridge can be seen. The city of Nazareth, the village of Jesus' youth, is nestled in a hollow along its southern slopes. At the eastern end of this ridge, Mount Tabor, to the right end of that ridge, an almost perfectly rounded hill, stands alone with slopes draping down to the valley below. In front of Mount Tabor lies the plain of Tabor, where Deborah and Barak defeated the Canaanite forces which had mobilized at Megiddo by the waters of Tanakh. The international highway stretches across the valley and disappears behind Mount Tabor. Mount Tabor and Mount Carmel are familiar landmarks cited by Jeremiah to herald the invading armies of Babylonia. As Tabor is among the mountains, and as Carmel is by the sea, shall one Babylon come. The fortress which stood on Mount Tabor in the days of Jesus was taken over by Galilean rebels in 66 AD, but fell to Rome in 68 AD. All right, so the Hill of Moreh, the Harod Valley, and Mount Gilboa. So if you find Mount Tabor, you go south, there's the Hill of Moreh. This kind of sticks out in the midst of that. You go south of that, you see the Harod Valley. We highlighted a path that goes through the Harod Valley. And so that's the area where we're at this point. And Mount Gilboa is the one that's on the southern end of the Harod Valley. That's where Saul died. By looking directly east, so if you're at Megiddo and you look directly east, it's possible to discern the Harod Valley between the Hill of Moreh and Mount Gilboa. Slightly higher ground around the 70-meter to 230-foot elevation marks the water divides between tributaries to Nahal Kishon, which drain the Mediterranean Sea, and a streambed which flows down the Harod Valley to join the Jordan River in the Rift Valley. Biblical events abound in this region. In the decades following Deborah and Barak's victory over the Canaanites, Egypt's control broke down and finally disappeared. There was no central authority to protect the settled population. Soon Midianite herdsmen from marginal regions to the southeast of the land between came with their flocks. Normally the farmers would allow shepherds' flocks to graze in their fields after the grain harvest to eat the remaining stubble and fertilize the fields. The Bible states, however, that the Midianites came each year as the grain harvest began and ravished the farmers' lush fields. For 7 years they had sowed their increasingly precious seed but had harvested little grain. The situation was very serious. The Bet-Shan and Harod valleys offered these desert invaders a convenient approach to the fertile region around the Jezreel Valley. They set up their main camp in a small sheltered valley along the northeastern slopes of the Hill of Moreh south of Nain, a village in the days of Jesus. As the crisis deepened, the northern tribes became desperate. Their agriculture and economic base was in shambles. Finally, a reluctant Gideon, a member of the tribe of Manasseh who lived in Orpha above Tanakh. So if you see Orpha, you go into the Carmel range a little bit there. So Tanakh, we have a little like red or orange box just below it. So south of Megiddo, you'll see Orpha. I think we even have it highlighted. All right, that's where Gideon was from. So Gideon was there, and the Midianites, they came in this way and ate all the crops and things in this area. Okay. Organized another peasant to try to deliver the Israelites. Gideon sent messengers throughout all of Manasseh who joined ranks with him after his initial mobilization. Gideon sent messengers to Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali, and they also came out to meet him. All of these tribes bordered the Jezreel Valley and had the most to gain by an Israelite victory, while the Midianites encamped behind the hill of Moreh. So kind of either in here somewhere. Gideon gathered his forces at the Harod Spring below the northern slopes of Mount Gilboa to be sure that Israel did not boast that it had rescued itself. Gideon's forces were reduced to 300 men along the bank of the stream, which issued from the spring of Harod. By reading the biblical text and comparing it with the Galilee map, you can trace the outcome of this encounter until it exits the southeast corner of the map. So we're going to mark this as we talk about Gideon. So highlight Orpha if you haven't done that yet. So if you see where Tanakh is, you're going into the mountains, highlight Orpha. You're going to highlight the Harod Spring. So if you see where Jezreel is on the map, you see where Jezreel Spring is on the map, just to the right of those and a little down is the Harod Spring on the Harod Valley. And if you go directly north of that, up, you're going to run into the Hill of Moreh, north of Shunem, just south of Nain. And then you're going to highlight a path on your map. Did everybody get those three things highlighted? Anybody need some help? Help your neighbor if you can. We're going to highlight from Bet Shan. So Bet Shan is farther down to the right of the Harod Spring and you go into the Harod Valley. If you find Bet Shan, Scythopolis is underneath it. That is another name for the. This is number 2. Marking on page 42. Sorry, we did that already, didn't we?
Yeah, I think so.
Sorry, I jumped to the wrong spot. Right, Gideon. Sorry, number 2, and I'll get to the right spot. Number 2 on page 43. Thank you, Linda. Right. Write Gideon in small black caps by the Harod Spring and circle his name in green. So, write Gideon in small black caps by the Harod Spring, which we highlighted. Circle his name in green. Gideon by the Harod Spring. So kind of, I wrote it mine between the Harod Spring and the Jezreel Spring is kind of where I wrote my Gideon. Jezreel, yeah. All right, so then we're going to write Midianites in small black caps between Nain and Neuran and circle the name in blue. So Nain is just north of the Hill of Moreh. And Neuran, if you go to the right of that, you see that Neuran there to the right of the Hill of Moreh. So in that area between Nain and Neuran, south of Endor, you're going to write Midianites in caps and circle that in blue because they're an enemy of Israel.
That goes right over mountain.
Yeah. Yes.
No,
Mount Moreh, right above Mount Moreh, yep. Right next to it, basically. So they're in a valley next to Mount Moreh. If you remember, Gideon's forces encircled the top of that valley, the 300 of them. All right, you're going to grab your green marker again, and we're going to do a green arrow from Gideon, just kind of sweeping up to the Hill of Moreh. Just a kind of an arrow, a couple inches, just going north to the Hill of Moreh, from Gideon to the Hill of Moreh.
From the city Gideon or from where you wrote?
From where you wrote Gideon. Yeah, from where you wrote Gideon. And then you're gonna use your red marker. You're gonna use like an asterisk, make an asterisk between the Midianite camp and the name Endor, if you've got room. Just between the Midianite camp and the name and the city of Endor. So Endor's just north of where you hopefully wrote Midian. You're gonna do a red confrontation mark there. So just south of Endor, do a red confrontation mark. All right. Everybody got that far? Anybody need a little help? All right. So you're going to do a blue flight arrows and green chase arrows. And so how we do flight arrows again, if you remember. And so if you had the whole distance was like from here to here, you're going to do like flight arrows. This is how I do them. All right? And then you can do a green chase arrow. Kind of like following it a little bit. So
After the writing of Gideon, the arrow of the Norah, you said to write one of their name by where?
did you have a confrontation mark?
Yeah, and I did.
So you should have written Gideons, you should have written Midianites. And then you do a red confirmationites. Yeah. Okay. All right, so we're doing a blue flight arrow and green chase arrows from the confrontation mark southeast towards so does everybody see everybody sees where Beth Shan is? All right, you see the city south of that called Rehab. All right, so you're basically going to go through the mountains in the valley from the red confrontation mark down to Rehab. Okay. And then you're going to continue on. Once you get to Rehab, you're going to go all the way to Abel, almost the same angle down on the Jordan River Valley. You see like Abel Meholan. So you continue those flight marks all the way down to there. And then once you have that, just somewhere on the arrow, write Midianite flight in black letters if you can. So the Midianites, after they fought each other because they were scared because of Gideon's tactics that the Lord told them to do. They fled, and not only those 300, but everybody else that was gathered pursued them until Midian fled off the map and south.
Does the green flight arrow also go down to there?
You don't have to do the green flight arrow the whole way down. You can if you want to. After the battle below Mount Tabor, the Midianites fled the same way they had come, over the low hill southeast of the hill Moreh and beyond the Harod Valley, to the fords along the Jordan River by Abel Melholah, other sites along their path of retreat, Succoth and Jogbehah, can be seen on the NCA map. The importance of this victory is recalled by later biblical writers. In the midst of the Assyrians' invasion of Galilee, Isaiah speaks of deliverance in a messianic era, as in the days of Midian. The psalmist used the Israelite victories in the days of Deborah and Gideon as object lessons to Israel to surrounding nations. One can hear the echoes of triumph in the play on words, Adamah, which in Hebrew means both the name of the city at the fords of the Jordan, and earth. So there's a city called Adam. We've seen it maybe on the Jordan, but the word really is Adamah in Hebrew. And so it also means earth, but it's also the city that God said. So it's like this. Make them like Midian, like Sisera, like Jabin in Nahal, Kishan. They were wiped out at Endor. They became dung at Adam or Adamah for the earth, right? So you get this idea where the psalmist brings these ideas of victory back using those place names. Before, if we'd have read those, you'd have been like, what? That doesn't make any sense. Like, but recalling these victories, and it's recalling this area right here between Moreh and Tabor, and Kishon Spring, that are going here in the Jezreel Valley.
Remember the Alamo.
Yeah, exactly. If you say remember the Alamo to somebody who has no idea about Texas or the history of that, you're like, well, that's just a weird phrase. Okay, I don't know what that means, right? It's giving more deeper context to those things. The end of the Egyptian rule was a prelude to struggles in this region as local nations emerged. Saul, who from Bezek had rescued Jabesh Gilead during an Ammonite siege early in his reign, that was over here, if you remember. Is that on this map?
What are we looking for?
Nah, it might not be on this map. It's right over here,
That's a little further.
a little further south, I think. So, during an Ammonite siege early in his reign on the NCA map, led the Israelite army to the Jezreel Spring shortly before his death. Meanwhile, the Philistines marched north, probably via the Megiddo Pass, crossed the valley, and camped at Shunem below the hill of Moreh. The night before his final battle, Paul slipped around Moreh to consult the witch of Endor.
Oh, that's smart.
Of the other biblical episodes which could be recounted, 3 deserve mention. King Ahab of Israel chose the site of Jezreel for his winter palace. So we saw Jezreel near where Gideon camped earlier. That was King Ahab's winter palace. It was a little closer to where his wife was from up here in Tyre and Sidon. From this site overlooking the Jezreel and Harod valleys, his administrator collected tolls on caravans passing between Arabia and Phoenicia. Here Ahab and his wife Jezebel seized Naboth's vineyards after ruthlessly ordering his death. The same vineyard in nearby Jezreel, Jehu's coup brought the dynasty of Ahab to a bloody end. During the same period, a wealthy woman who lived with her elderly husband at Shunem arranged a rooftop room for the prophet Elisha, who predicted the birth of her child the following year. Years later, Elisha restored that child to life after his untimely death. It's no surprise that when Jesus raised the only son of a widow from Nain on the other side of the hill of Moreh from Shunem, people recalled Elisha and proclaimed that a great prophet has arisen among us. We looked at that in our Thursday Bible study this last week. That was the passage we looked at. So if you find the hill of Moreh again, which is where we wrote Midianites at. So Nain is on the northern slopes of that hill. That's where Jesus raised the widow's son at Nain. He's coming down from Galilee. So he's coming down from Galilee, using probably that road there. And he's got a crowd of people following him. Coming out of the village of Nain, they're carrying this man in procession. And these 2 parades meet, Luke 7 describes.
If you look south of
Yep. And so that's where he raised from the dead. And so Elijah raised the widow's son at Shunem. Or it wasn't the widow's son yet, it was an old woman's son. But it's no coincidence that they said this is a great prophet.
They were only less than 5 miles. No.
They're about a mile
Closer
apart.
than that, about a mile apart.
So it'd be like here to Imperial. And if you think there's probably not a lot of people in these villages, there are probably a lot of relatives and intermarrying between these villages.
And that would have been a memorable event, someone being raised from the dead, even though
It was
Elijah did
600, 700 years, yeah.
Or 7, that doesn't matter. I mean, look how close they are.
Yeah. So that would have been what they were known for, in that hill, that area. Okay. Southeast, so Mount Gilboa and the Dothan Valley. So Mount Gilboa is this, so it's south of where Gideon was, the Road Spring. That's the northern slopes of Mount Gilboa. And then the Dothan Valley is south of that there. Dothan was where Joseph was sold into slavery at. All right. When we turn to the southeast on the hill of Megiddo, we look toward the famous mound of Tanakh and beyond to the gateway of Samaria at Beth Hagan. Biblical texts bring this area to life. Jacob's sons were tending their herds in the Dothan Valley, far from home, when their brother Joseph arrived, sent by his father to check on his brothers. Sibling jealousy almost cost Joseph his life, but the eldest brother Reuben negotiated compromise. Joseph was sold to a caravan traders passing along this international trade route and soon was on his way to Egypt. There he became second only to Pharaoh and in the end provided deliverance for his entire family. Joseph's 2 sons became the tribes of Ephraim, Israel's tribal leader, and Manasseh, who first settled the southernmost parts of our Galilee map. During the rule of Israel's kings, the armies of Damascus penetrated deep into Israel's territory. Once they tried to capture the prophet Elisha at Dothan, since Elisha was informing his king of the enemy's every move. The rest of the story reveals Israelite morality in the midst of apostasy, underscored when Naaman, the famed commander of the army of Damascus and a leper, was healed. As Jesus and his disciples tried to pass through Samaria, inhabited by hostile Samaritans in their day, they were turned back and had to proceed to Jerusalem via another route. This may have been by Beth Hagan Gene. The disciples wanted to call down fire, but Jesus reminded them the ways of Israelite mercy. He later healed 10 lepers on the border between Samaria and Galilee, but only one returned to give thanks, and he was a Samaritan. The healing of the Samaritan and Naaman of Damascus, both seen as Israel's enemies, revealed that God's mercy extended to everyone in Galilee of the Gentiles. So this area in here, if this southern area of so south of Jezreel, you'll see Beth Hagan, which they mentioned a few times. That's the area that we're talking about. It's the border between Galilee and Samaria, and it's the same. The connection between Naaman and the healing of leprosy is very great as well. Okay. Southwest. So we're going. This is through the passes. This is the Aruna Pass. We talked about that last time. Earlier, we saw the entire stage before us from Mount Carmel to Samaria can be reached via passes across the Carmel Range. One of these led to the Hill of Megiddo. Campaigns along this route are too many to list here. Megiddo's need for security is recorded in its fortifications, including strong gateway systems, walls, and an underground tunnel hidden from enemy forces, bringing water into the city. Here at Megiddo, one of Judah's last kings attempted to fulfill Isaiah's prophecy of a messianic reign by a descendant of David. King Josiah had brought sweeping reforms in the south and now held out hope to those who remained in the north after Assyria's cruel deportations. As Pharaoh Necho moved north along the coastal highway, Josiah followed the same plan as the Canaanites had used against Thutmose III 8 centuries earlier. He waited near Megiddo as the Egyptian army marched through the Aruna Megiddo Pass. Josiah lost his life in the battle. Judah retreated, and the prophet Jeremiah composed laments for this one who many thought would be Messiah. So that's right here at Megiddo. So Jesus of Nazareth overlooking the Jezreel Valley in Galilee. So go back up on the Nazareth Ridge, so this northern ridge in the valley, and you'll see the town of Nazareth about a half inch or an inch up into the valley there. You see how did you ever find Nazareth?
Yeah.
You see how Nazareth is not on a major road, right? It kind of can see the whole valley, but it doesn't get to necessarily partake or get the blessings of any of the trade or the wealth that goes through these trade routes. So this is where Jesus grew up. This kind of almost backwoods town, if you will. We've already noted that the position of the village of Nazareth, I'm on the bottom of page 44, along a ridge by the same name which forms the northern border of the Jezreel Valley. This was the setting in which Jesus grew up. In a few minutes from his home, he could reach the edge of a steep scarp seen just south of Nazareth on the Galilee map. For an overview of the valley, including Mount Tabor, the Hill of Moreh, Mount Gilboa, and the hills of Samaria. In the other direction, he could climb to the top of the ridge above his home and not only see the features noted above to the south, but also Mount Carmel, the port of Akko, Ptolemy's, the Mediterranean Sea, the higher hills of Upper Galilee, and the lofty Mount Hermon, covered with winter snows and towering above the city of Damascus. Many of the events we have surveyed above were recited in the synagogue school Jesus and other children attended. Jesus would have known the history of the Jezreel Valley on the southern border of the threatened tribe of Zebulun. Whereas it once resounded with the tramp of the Assyrian boot, in Jesus' time it heard the rumble of Roman legions. The northern Israelite tribes had been blessed with victories led by Deborah and Gideon, but humbled by losses before the Philistines, the Arameans, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Greeks, and now the Romans. The name of the oppressor had changed, but Galilee was again under imperial control. The burden of the past and the present most certainly engendered hope for the future among the inhabitants of Nazareth when they looked out over Galilee in all directions from the summit of the Nazareth Ridge. This is from Isaiah 9. Just as in the past He, the Lord, humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. So in the future he will honor the way of the sea, the Hazar Megiddo route on both sides of the Nazareth Ridge, regions beyond the Jordan, in Galilee, the circle of the Gentiles. The routes in the tribal territories of Zebulun and Naphtali, written in on Galilee map that we wrote those names in, make clear the way the honor declared by Isaiah the prophet was such a magnificent promise in Jesus' day. The gospel writer knew that Nazareth, where Jesus grew up, was in the territory of Zebulun, and that Capernaum, where most of Jesus' ministry occurred, was the territory of Naphtali. The way of the sea was the Hazar Megiddo road, which descended to Lake Galilee, circumvented the Nazareth Ridge, and passed through both the territory of Naphtali and Zebulun. Matthew's regional reference gives a very specific and quite intentional message to the reader. Jesus of Nazareth fulfilled Isaiah's prophecy. At Nazareth, Jesus used past events to the north to convict his audience. When he returned from his visit to Jerusalem and read from the prophet Isaiah in his home synagogue of Nazareth, we read that in a couple weeks ago in church. Pastor Schultz preached on that, right? Who invited this guy to preach, right? Or something like that. Oh, the preacher nobody wanted. That's what it was, right? You remember that one, right? All spoke well of him and expected great works to follow. However, Jesus turned the history of cultural, economic, and military oppression in the north upside down when he stated what everyone would have rather forgotten. Elijah and Elisha, the famous prophets of the north, had done their greatest works among Israel's enemies and not among the Israelites. Geography and history were potent teaching tools, as seen in the sudden change of attitude in the people of Nazareth. They tried to throw him off the ridge down into the Jezreel Valley.
And that's where you see about half-inch amount of the precipice.
Yeah.
That's where they believe that he was taken.
Yeah.
And last time we went there, it was the view is just extraordinary.
And you had a picture of that.
Yeah, I've shown that in Thursday morning Bible class or Sunday morning or both. I've shown that picture before. And the locals call it talk about how things survive and morph and change. They call it jumping hill because they believe that Jesus jumped and flew away instead of walked through the midst of the crowd like the scriptures record.
And in fact,
Or that's what the legend says.
and there's an inscription describing that right up there on the little monument that's there. It doesn't talk about him walking through the crowd. It talks about him jumping off and flapping away. So,
Yeah, so it's just you look at legends. Is there some basis in truth in that legend? Yes. Has it been blown out of proportion, much like our tall tales that we have here in the United States? Yeah. All right. So we again turn to George Adam Smith's The Historical Geography of the Land of Israel, of the Holy Land, for his summary of Galilee's open character and insightful meditation by Jesus on Jesus' youth. Smith used the Greek form of Jezreel as Esdraelon in referring to the great Jezreel Valley below the Nazareth Ridge. We're not going to read all of that today, but it talks about how he saw the different things that are around him, where he would have been removed from it, but at the same time where he would have seen it, and just all the things that have gone by, the different travelers that have gone by on these roads just below Nazareth, that he would have seen them and but not been part of that. All right. So we're going to move on to a different map now. We're going to go to the SCA map. That is map number 4. So we're going from number 5 to number 4. So as we were looking, so if you kind of put these maps together, they almost kind of form almost a connection there if you put them together. So this is the southern and central arenas. We've been looking at the northern arenas in Galilee. Now we're looking at the southern and central arenas. Number 4 is in the top left corner, the SCA map. This is southern and central arenas. And just a quick kind of, as we're looking at the map, as we're getting familiar with these things, on the left you see what big sea? Mediterranean. And then in the middle you see which sea? That sea. You notice how zoomed in we are. We don't even see the bottom of the Dead Sea here. And if you go north, and what is this valley called? Rift Valley, or where the Jordan River is. You notice that as we go north there, we don't even get to the Sea of Galilee. All right? So none of the things that were on our previous map are on this map. Okay? And ever remember my trick for finding Jerusalem? Go to the top of this Dead Sea. Go to the top of the Dead Sea and go over about a third of the way towards the Mediterranean Sea, straight over, and there you'll see Jerusalem. Right? So it doesn't matter what map you're on. If you find the top of the Dead Sea and go about a third of the way over towards the Mediterranean Sea, you'll find Jerusalem. You don't need to do anything with that yet, but I just want to orientate you so that you know where that landmark is, because I'll probably tell you things in relation to where Jerusalem is, because that's kind of right in the center of our map, just north of center there. Okay, so this unit on page 46 of your study guide introduces 3 geographical regions which commanded southern trade: the Philistine Plain, which is this white area out over here on the left. All right, the Negev, this is the bottom area here, and the southern and central Transjordan Plateau, which is this area. Transjordan means across the Jordan, so this is the area on the right side of our map. All right. During the Age of Nations, that's 1200 to 740, so that's the time of the judges through kind of the Assyrian, or to the Assyrian conquests. The Philistines, Judah, Moab, and Edom competed in these regions for control as much southern commerce as possible. All except Judah were located along major highways. Judah's heartland lay deep in the hill country, and to compete it had to push west to the international coastal highway, in Philistia south into the Negev or and beyond, or east into the Transjordan highway beyond the Rift Valley. During a shorter interlude from 120 BC to 64 BC, prior to Roman control, local peoples competed in these same regions. Names had been changed, but the economic objective was the same: to control trade passing through the land between. And there's regions on the run, which we're not going to go through today, but we're going to go ahead and start marking on our SCA map. If you haven't had a chance to read those in regions on the run, I'd encourage you to do that at another time and work through those. All right, highlight these regions west of the Rift Valley, so that's towards the Mediterranean Sea on your map. Okay, the coastal plain up near in the top left quadrant of your map. You'll see Lod or Lydda. You'll see coastal plain in caps, kind of in the middle of that area in the top map there. So highlight coastal plain. You'll see Joppa kind of out if you're going along the coast, you'll see Joppa. If you go and follow the road from Joppa to Azor to Lod, you'll see the coastal plain just south of that road, if you haven't found that yet. Okay. Also highlight the Philistine alluvial plain. So stay in the plain, kind of follow the road south, and you'll see in smaller capital letters, Philistine alluvial plain. All right, now we got to find the hill country. So find Jerusalem again, and go south on the road that comes south and a little bit west from Jerusalem. You'll see it go by Ramat Rachel, and then you'll see Bethlehem there. Just south of Bethlehem, you'll see in capital letters hill country. Highlight that in yellow, hill country. All right, to the right of hill country, so south of Jerusalem, you'll run into Ramat Rahel in parentheses. You'll run into Bethlehem. You'll run into Beth Abel. You'll see the Herodium to the right. Just to the left of the Herodium is hill country in capital letters.
It's spread out, so. Well, the H that starts it is south of Hebron.
So you're coming from Jerusalem. Right there.
Seek and find.
Oh, you guys are a little different map than I have. Sorry.
Here's Hill, H
Oh, sorry, hill country.
Yeah, look south of Hebron.
So yours is spread out a little bit different than mine is. Sorry about that. Hill country.
Yeah,
all the way
south
around.
of south and southeast of Hebron is the 8.
You guys have a newer version of my map. Sorry about that. Everything else has been the same so far. Right.
Okay, here's the.
And then if you kind of the same orientation, if you go towards the Dead Sea, you'll see wilderness the same way.
Run all the way up.
I like that.
Highlight wilderness. So you'll see going the same way, you'll see wilderness coming up that way.
The W for wilderness is due east of En Gedi on the Dead Sea.
All right.
If that helps. Maybe probably doesn't help. But
All right, so let me look at your map for how they do Shvela.
Oh,
Shvela is going to be to the left, and it's the same orientation as you go all the way up. Shvela starts SCH if you go to the left of the hill country towards the Mediterranean Sea. You'll see the Shvela. So the Shvela starts here and goes up. We got Shvela. Sorry, we got. So you got the wilderness. There's the wilderness, right? And here's the Shvela. Oh, so highlight wilderness and Shvela. If you haven't done that yet, everybody else got that one?
yeah.
So my map's just slightly different than your guys'. Sorry about that. So if you have the Judean wilderness or the hill country will go this way. The Judean wilderness will go this way. The Shvela will come up this way on your maps. Okay. All right, and then we're going to go south, and we're going to try to find the western Negev and the eastern Negev. Let me see what that looks like there. You'll see, yep. Your guys are easier to find than my map. The western Negev is going to be over here in capital letters.
And it says basin also.
And the eastern Negev is going to be over here closer to the Dead Sea. But on the the western Negev, the eastern Negev. And those are very arid regions. The Negev does not get a lot of rainfall at all. All right. And then we're going to highlight the following regions east of the Rift Valley. So we're going to be on the right side of the Dead Sea here. We're going to highlight Moab, which is on the down on the bottom right, near the bottom. Highlight Moab. Yep, down very almost south on the right side. We need to highlight the Medeba Plateau, which is if you come up north of the seam, you'll see the Medeba Plateau in all capital letters there as well. Yep. Not the city, we're looking for the capital letters, the Medeba Plateau. There's also a city of Medeba, which you were able to go last time. It has the world's oldest map. It's on the floor of a church there. So, pretty cool. And then, as a map guy, you can tell, I found that fascinating. All right. And then you're going to go from north of the Medeba Plateau, you're going to run into Ammon or Ammon, and that's going to be north there in all capital letters. You'll see Rabbah, Philadelphia, Ammon there. That's where the Ammonites lived. The capital of Ammon, Jordan, is in their what was their territory. Okay. All right. We're going to find names in bold on the SCA map unless the LB map is specified. So if you want to have your LB map kind of to the side, you can, but we're going to be working and just highlighting only on the SCA map. Okay. So position your LB map. That was number 2. Kind of do that next to this map here. As we're working and going with that, you can see both maps on the screen here. I'll have to scoot it back a little farther. You can see that. So you can see kind of the maps. You can have them side by side a little bit. That's the number 2 map. Like I said, we're going to be mostly working on the SCA map. Note the limits of the SCA map on its Finder map to top left corner. So if you see the top left corner of the SCA map up here, you see how zoomed in it is compared to all the other things we've seen on that map. If you see Megiddo and Bet Shan and some of those other places that we've come to know, you see how zoomed in this map is. you'll see the features like the Dead Sea and the Rift Valley and all those things as well. All right. The Negev, the basin, we've already identified some of those things as well. You'll see the systems, make yourself at home. So we've kind of done that already, making ourselves at home a little bit with this map. So that second paragraph there on page 46. Southern regions on the SCA map are far less fragmented than those in Galilee. The map simply has a coastal plain, a hill country, bordered on either side by lower regions, the Shephelah and the wilderness. A Rift Valley and a high Transjordan plateau, eroded by deep canyons. The western and eastern Negev down in the bottom of the hill country could be compared to the Jezreel Valley in the north, but the Jezreel Valley and its approaches are far more complex. As we study the SCA map in this chapter and the detailed Judah and Benjamin maps in following chapters, we will find that the south has many smaller subregions. The International Coastal Highway enters the LB map near Raphia. All right, so I'm not seeing that on this one. That must be on the other map. Okay, and then it makes its way north through the relatively open coastal plain known as Philistia. Sorry, I lost my place.
It's the,
Yeah,
and it's the road that's to the far.
yeah,
uh,
and
far
yeah, we'll highlight that in a little bit. There are a number of branches on this highway through Philistia. The main branches in the west, already highlighted on the LB map, avoids coastal sand dunes as it moves north by Philistine sites of Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod, and then on to Joppa and or Aphek. Other branches of this highway head inland from Raphia, Gaza, or crossroads near Ashkelon. They make their way north and ultimately reach Aphek. Find these are also on the LB map. So this is talking about the maps over here as we talked about the different routes, different ways to go farther inland or up into the hill country. All right. 5 of the main Philistine cities of Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod, Gath, and Ekron on the LB map. So you can find them on the LB map. We'll see them here on our other SCA map. We're going to do some stuff with them in a little bit. But Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod, Ekron, and Gath, those are the areas on this map. So we'll find those a little bit later on the SCA map. Reflects the clear understanding of geoeconomic realities in this part of the land between. 3 of these 5 cities surround the basin of fertile soil from the mountains, which has accumulated on what we call the Philistine alluvial plain, which we marked. Elevations around this plain show that it is a lower area. Higher ridges along the coast divert its waters to the north around by the outlet of Timor. The Shephelah, which is, so say that word with me, Shephelah, right? It's the Hebrew for lowland. You might think more like foothills. Okay? Might be another way to think about that. Tom, any other descriptions like that? Just that idea.
Isn't it direct translation foothills?
It might be, yeah. And so that's between the coastal plain and the Judean wilderness. And we highlighted the Shephelah on your map, on the SCA map. That was the foothills that were there. Its rolling terrain is seen on the SCA map to the north and south of Gath, sometimes called Gath of the Philistines, to distinguish it from the other sites in the country of the same name. Gath means press, Gath. And so they had a lot of olive presses, and so more than one city got the name. Press, like an olive press. Yeah.
And they don't pronounce the H.
So it's
They'll
be
call it
Gat.
Like
Yeah.
cat, except with a G.
And probably a better, it'd be like Gethsemane. So it's right? That's where that name comes from. All right. As one moves eastward beyond Azekah, the Shephelah becomes an area of low hills which abruptly end in the uplifted hill countries with its high ridges and deep V-shaped canyons. It's easy to see why the broad valleys of the Shephelah became the battlefield between people living along the coastal plain and those in the hill country of Judah. And so you have the people living in the hill country. They wanted to get down into the valleys of the Shephelah. The people on the coastal plain, they controlled the trade, but they wanted to have control of the valleys where there's good farmland in the Shephelah. And so they met in the middle, and that's where most of the conflicts occurred, like Samson and David and Goliath, and some of those things of the pages of Scripture that we maybe know the stories well, but not the contexts. Okay.
We're gonna drive in during the day, aren't we?
I think so.
Yeah. You'll see, as you drive from Joppa up there, you can see you're going real flat, and then you go through these nice hills, and then you get up into these big hills, and you can see the progression as you're driving to Jerusalem.
Well, we're gonna, I think, highlight the road that is on here, which is almost the exact road that we'll take today.
Yeah.
So we'll highlight that a little bit. All right. Judah was located in the hill country between the coastal plain and the Dead Sea. It was cut off from eastern trade by the wilderness, and its cliffs falling into the deep Rift Valley, and the shores of the Dead Sea, the lowest point on earth. The eastern obstacles made the Shephelah to the west much more attractive for those in Judah wanting to expand to the coastal trade routes. However, insecure valleys in the Shephelah and the determination of the Philistines stood between Judah and its commercial dreams. The southern Shephelah between Lachish, and that's how Lachish, some people pronounce that Lachish, but Lachish, and the hill country was removed from the main Philistine cities and held more promise of Judah. So Lachish, don't have that one highlighted on here. It's here, it's south of Gath is where Lachish is, but it's in that Shephelah area
It's due south about 3 inches,
of Gath there.
and we visited that last time.
Yeah, that's the oldest, most intact siege ramp from the Assyrians is there.
It's huge. You can still see it.
All right. This region absorbed trade coming from the Negev and along an inland branch of the coastal highway via Gerar. As caravan trade from Arabia grew, routes through the Negev took an added importance, a fact we shall see illustrated later in this chapter. 3 broader valleys north of Lachish and Merash, the Elah, Sorek, and Ayalon valleys, were much more threatened by the Philistines. So these are their valleys. They're kind of the Ayalon Valley, the Sorek Valley, and then down here you have the Elah Valley. Their routes, they're cut into here. The ways that the Judah could get down, but also Philistines could get up. And so those become major battles of stories you already know from Scripture. But now you'll see how the land plays a part in that. Right? They're not going to come up through the mountain ranges. They're going to come up through the valleys. That's where the armies come up through. There are much more broad valleys, guarded routes leading in and out of the hill country of Judah. And these became battlefields between the Philistines and the Israelites. These valleys were also Judah's first line of defense when it was defending itself against imperial forces coming from the coastal plain. The names of sites in and around these valleys appear in some of the most action-packed stories of the Bible and tell us whatever the context, the Shephelah and its access routes were at stake. Either Judah was pushing out of the hill country, or outsiders were containing or invading Judah. So they're the ways in and out for Judah. This is King David and the kings that followed, in and out through these valleys, or those 3 routes, ways they could go. The Negev, so we're going to look at the southern route now. You highlighted the Negev, the eastern and western Negev on your maps. Offered Judah an easier opportunity to expand. The region had strong links to the hill country around Hebron. So Hebron is south, kind of almost near the seam, south, and then it's just about an inch to the left of the seam. Hebron was the first capital for David. That's where Caleb settled his forces, was in Hebron, right? And it's limited rainfall, but it's limited rainfall permitted for some seasonal farming. We've already seen in our reading in the regions around that caravans arriving from Edom to the southeast could easily reach Mediterranean ports such as Gaza and Ashkelon via relatively unobstructed routes in the Negev. The relief, flow, and elevations map inside the back cover of the regions around offers you an opportunity to bring your own caravan from Edom to Philistia via Negev. So there was room to go from here. You can kind of see how the routes, there are not as many up and colored variations as you come through the Negev. And so that was, while it was harder, as far as there wasn't as much rainfall, there was a flatter route to go that way. So, yeah, not as much rain or oases or those kinds of things. Southern routes. Remains of cities at Beersheba and Tisaba and forts at Ared show Judah's determination to hold this important link between the coastal and Transjordan highways. All right. So there's some top stuff talking about regions on the run and some of those canyons there. Basically, it's saying that there are kind of some major canyons over here on the east, and we'll look at those when we get there in a little bit. All right. So our work in this unit covers 4 specific periods from the emergence of the nation of Judah through ensuing conflicts with its neighbors to the fall of Jerusalem and exile and many of its inhabitants to Babylon. David and Saul is part of this, and there's a lot of geographical stuff in the midst of this. So here's the 4 things. We're going to look at the Philistines entrenched along the southern coastal highway. So the Philistines owned this area. Their 5 principal cities are there. And so when you talk about the stories of David and Goliath and Saul and David fighting against the Philistines, that's all because they're centered right here. They control the trade route, and they're trying to stop Judah from coming down, or they're trying to push up and control Judah even more. All right. The second one is King Mesha of Moab reasserted Moabite independence and expanded onto the Medeba Plateau. So Moab's down here in the bottom right. Israel had pushed out, Judah had pushed out and controlled into the Medeba Plateau, which controlled the east-west trade route. Well, at one point, the Moabite king, he pushed up to gain influence and dominance there. That's the second one. The third one, Transjordanian invaders tried to humble Jehoshaphat of Judah and gain control of southern trade. So we'll talk about that one as well. The fourth one, Edom rejoiced in Judah's problems, which left the Negev open for settlement. So as Judah had problems, Edom from down here came up and moved into the Negev to settle. And actually, when Judah's finally deported to Babylon, exiled to Babylon, Edom will actually come all the way up and settle here, which is why you have Herod, who's called King of the Jews. Herod is an Edomite. So Herod, that's where he married into the royal Jewish family, and then he basically took over as king. So, but he was an Edomite.
But the Edomites in the New Testament times, they called them
Idumeans. Yeah, Idumeans. Yeah.
So if you see Idumeans, that means they used to be Edomites.
Yeah. All right. So event 14, the Philistine sheriff. This is fun. If you remember David, he was anointed by Samuel to be king. Well, the problem was Saul was still king, and although he's the next king, he's not king yet. Saul's still alive, and so you can see where Saul is not a big fan of David, is threatened by David. If you remember, they come back from killing Goliath, and the women chant in the city, Saul has killed his thousands, and David his tens of thousands, right? And Saul gets jealous, and he tries to kill David on a number of occasions. David flees for his life, but he gathers around him this ragtag group of warriors. They're the rejects of society. And he is able to lead them, and he basically becomes, takes over a city and becomes kind of this sheriff in the Negev, wandering from place and around here. Saul doesn't come after him because he's protected by the Philistines, but David is able to kind of control this area here. So there's a lot of political stuff going on, but there's also in the land. So we'll talk about what this is. So the charts are there. This is the beginning of, it's right around 1,000, the Age of Nations that are there. And David and Solomon began. So we're going to mark on the SCA map. We're going to put an orange box around the tribe of Ephraim in the top center. So Ephraim is just to the right of the line, the seam line on your map. It's in all capital letters. Does everybody find that? Right. So put an orange box around Ephraim. Bless you. So the tribe of Ephraim there. Ephraim is the most dominant tribe in the northern part, the northern tribes. All right. So then we're also going to underline the tribe of Benjamin in orange. So don't put a box around. So go south of Ephraim, just north of Jerusalem. You'll see Benjamin in all caps. Just underline Benjamin.
Poor Benjamin gets no respect.
Benjamin gets no respect. This was the tribal brother of the house of Joseph. You remember Joseph's brother, younger brother was Benjamin. His original name was Ben-Ami, son of my sorrow, because Rachel died giving birth to him, and she named him that. But his dad renamed him. Benjamin is the tribe which Saul is from. Okay, Saul is from the tribe of Benjamin. Put a green box around the tribe of Judah in the center, just to the left and down from the middle seam. All right. Put a green box around Judah. The house of Judah. This is the house which David and Solomon and the kings of the south are from. And then we're going to put an orange on the city dot. So just on the black dot, I've kind of put an orange on the city dot for Bethel. So if you go between Ephraim and Benjamin, you'll see, so if you go up from Benjamin, you have that underlined, you'll see Ramah, Mizpah, Elbira, and then Bethel, Luz. You see where I'm talking about? Yeah. So Bethel, Luz, go south of Ephraim, put an orange dot on the city dot for Bethel. So again, find Benjamin. If you go straight up from Benjamin, you'll see Ramah, you'll see Mizpah, you'll see Elbira in parentheses, and then you'll see Bethel and Luz. So on the Bethel dot, put an orange, mark an orange on the dot.
Which is south of Luz. It's to the bottom of Luz.
Yes.
Straight. And my like I said, I'm a little less confident because this map's slightly different. Yeah, just south of Luz. Yeah. Just different names for the same place. So just south of the word Luz. All right. It's in Ephraim. All right, so then we're going to find Bethlehem. So again, find Jerusalem. And you're going to follow the road south. You'll see Ramat Rahel. You'll see, and then the next city you'll kind of come to as you go south is Bethlehem. Put a green dot on its city. And then we're going to keep following that road to the south. It doesn't matter which branch you take. You'll come down to Hebron. So if you find the Judah box that you circled or you highlighted, yeah, just go south of there a couple inches and you'll see Hebron. And put a green dot on Hebron. Those are cities, main cities in Judah. Hebron was actually David's first capital before he conquered Jerusalem. All right, we're going to go and look at 1 Samuel 15. Oh. Running away from me there, Alan, huh?
I thought he ran out of the room.
Exercise.
I lost my mark.
It's better losing your mind like I've done a couple times.
Or your marbles, right? All right, 1 Samuel chapter 15. And then we're going to start at verse 34, so near the end of chapter 15. So then Samuel went to Ramah, and Saul went up to his house in Gibeah of Saul, and Samuel did not see Saul again until the day of his death, but Samuel grieved over Saul, and the Lord regretted that he had made Saul king over Israel. So remember this, as Saul kind of went his own way, did his own thing, offered his own sacrifices, didn't listen to God. David's anointed king, and Samuel actually doesn't see Saul anymore. So let's just find Ramah and Gibeah on here. So if you see where Benjamin is, all right. If you go just north of there is Ramah. You see that? Just south of there, towards Jerusalem from Ramah, is Gibeah. So you see how close these guys were? Where's our scale on this map? On the bottom left. These guys were a mile apart.
Maybe 2 miles.
Maybe 2 miles apart. But Samuel never went to see Saul again. Right? And he'd have had to go right by Saul's city because he was coming up from the south. He'd had to go right by Saul's city to get to his home city in Ramah. Okay. And then we're continuing on. The Lord said to Samuel, how long will you grieve over Saul, since I've rejected him from being king over Israel? Fill your horn with oil, and I will send you to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I've provided myself a king among sons. And Samuel said, how can I go? If Saul hears it, he will kill me. How would Saul hear about Samuel going? So he's in Ramah. What city does he have to go right back to get down to Bethlehem? What does he have to go right by? He's got to go by Gibeah, where Saul's capital is. And these aren't large cities here. Right? Is Saul going to hear about it? Yeah. Right? How can I go? If Saul hears it, he'll kill me. And the Lord said, take care with you and say, I've come to sacrifice to the Lord. And invite Jesse to the sacrifice. So he's kind of saying, all right, where's Samuel going? He's going to sacrifice. Okay, Samuel does that all the time. And invite Jesse and his family to the sacrifice. So Samuel does that. And then in verse 6, he looks on Jesse's sons. He sees the oldest one. He says, surely this is the Lord's anointed. But the Lord said to Samuel, do not look on his appearance or the height of stature, because I've rejected him. For the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. And so Jesse continues to call all his other sons, and none of them are chosen. And then Samuel in verse 11 says to Jesse, are all your sons here? And he said, there remains yet the youngest, but behold, he is keeping the sheep. And Samuel said to Jesse, send and get him, for we will not sit down till he comes here. And he brought him, and it was David, and the Lord said, this is him, and he anoints him. And then in verse 14, so David's anointed secretly. In verse 14, the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul, and a harmful spirit of the Lord tormented him. And Saul's servant said to him, behold, a harmful spirit is tormenting you. Let our Lord now command your servants who are before you to seek out a man who is skillful in playing the lyre or harp. And when the harmful spirit of God is upon you, he will play it, and you will be well. So they said, hey, find me somebody that can play music that will calm you down. And they say, well, Jesse's son, Jesse from Bethlehem has a son who does that. And so David is found and brought into the king's court to play for Saul. Right? But you think about how God is arranging this. What is David learning the whole time?
How to be king.
How to run a kingdom.
For 20 years.
Yeah, right?
But it's almost funny.
I mean, it's just it's tragic for Saul.
Yeah,
But
I mean, it's still the way that God
the
does
irony
it.
and the way that God sets that up, and so Saul and David is serving him there as well in the midst of that. So David's got, this is what they said. If you get somebody as your king, he's going to take your young men to be his servants.
Saul isn't the king,
Saul is still the king.
he's still the king.
So David's in the court as the court minstrel.
But David's kind of the king because he's been anointed.
David's been anointed, but he hasn't.
He hasn't
The
taken
mantle
over.
hasn't shifted from Saul. Saul is still the king. And David says, I'm not going to do anything against the Lord's anointed. And not everybody knows that David's been anointed king. It's not like there was a big public ceremony. This is in David's house, Jesse's house.
He was known as a bona fide king. It was a 20-year period from the anointing, when he was anointed.
Yeah. There was a while. Yeah. 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 All right. So we see the idea here of what's going on. So the reading sets the scene for the cat and mouse game between King Saul from the tribe of Benjamin and a tribe beholden to the house of Joseph, and David, son of Jesse of the house of Judah. The prophet Samuel was surprised at the command to travel south to Bethlehem to Judah to anoint a new king. Ephraim of the house of Joseph had always led the Israelite tribes, and even after its crushing defeat at the hands of the Philistines, still held its head high. It was in this context that Saul of Benjamin became king of Israel. Samuel knew that his walk for a few hours from Ramah to Bethlehem had serious implications and would ultimately lead to tribal conflict. So we're going to keep marking here on the SCA map. All right. These show we're going to look at the coastal plain maps here as we look at these here as well. Again, trying to get out of the Shvelah and into the land of the Philistines. So on the SCA map, find the coastal route running through Gaza and begin highlighting where the road enters the map from the southwest. All right, so on the southwest, really close to the sea, you'll see the road that says, like, to Sinai in Egypt. Start there and go to Gaza. So we're going to go then we're going to go north on that road, kind of connect it to Ashdod. You're going to go by Ashkelon, but not through Ashkelon, up to Ashdod. It's kind of the next major city as you go north. So follow the branches that lead you to the most direct route to Ashdod. And then you're going to go up and find Jabneel north of that and highlight the road that leads you to Jabneel. And then from Jabneel, we're going go north. There's a branch. One leads to Azor and one leads to like Ono, O-N-O. Right? Go to the one that leads to Ono. Highlight from Jabneel to Ono. Yoko Ono, right? And then you'll see Aphek there. So you go north on that, and then you cut due east for a second to Aphek, and then go straight north off the map.
Everybody thinks Yoko is Japanese. She's really Hebrew.
Right? The road you just highlighted, that's the main coastal plain. The coastal route, I should say. Now there are other routes. You can see how many routes are going north and south here, but that one is the main coastal route. All right, so we're going to go back to Gaza, so the south of the map. So, and find Yurza. So if you just go, don't highlight yet, but you see south of Gaza is this like Yurza, right? So highlight from Yurza off the map to the left. So we're going to highlight the secondary route. It doesn't go through Gaza, but off the map to Yurza. And then you're going to keep going. You're going to keep going east, and you're going to find T.L. Hesse. It's in parentheses. Highlight next time up the road. And then T.L. Erini or whatever that is. And then all the way up to Gath. You're going to go the road just by Gath there. And then from Gath, follow the road up towards Ekron, and then Gibbethon, and then up to Lod, and then up to Aphek. And then off the map like we already have. That's the secondary, that's the eastern branch of the coastal plain. It's a little more towards the Shvelah. The road might be a little firmer and not as sandy in parts. All right, and now we're going to highlight the road that gets us down through the Negev. So we're going to go back to Gaza. And then if you go south and east toward Gerar, G-E-R-A-R, so from Gaza to Gerar.
Cross over that second coastal highway
Yep.
to get to Gerar.
And then down towards Beersheba. And then don't highlight, there's like two Beershebas. Yeah, it's kind of the same route, but you see where Eror is? You're going from whichever Beersheba you highlighted, go from there, just follow the road down to Eror and off the map. All right, so David's triumph over Goliath the Philistine in 1 Samuel 17 in the Elah Valley east of Gath on the SCA map naturally brought him the admiration of many in Israel. So I just want to help you find that for a second. So find Gath. Yes, find Gath. That's on the two coastal highways that you drew. It's on the one farther away from the coast. And Gath is there. So kind of just above the seam in the map, about an inch above the seam. You see Gath? Yeah. If you go to the right, to the east, you'll see Azekah. And then if you keep following that road up that little valley, that's the Elah Valley. That's where David and Goliath fought. All right? If you keep following that road up, you'll run into Bethlehem. Past Timnah and Hushan, and then Bethlehem and up to Jerusalem.
And that brings something in here real quick.
Yeah, please, Tom.
Archaeological note. You see that K.H. Kiafa right next to Azekah, I mean. Right there, they found the first, or the oldest example of Hebrew writing anywhere. It dated from the time of David, and that was an outpost that David established. And look where he did, right in the Elah Valley where he fought Goliath, which I always thought was interesting.
Yeah.
He knew where the vulnerabilities were.
Yeah. All right. Naturally brought him admiration of Israel. Saul's jealousy grew, and David barely escaped alive from Saul's court at Gibeah. Geographical detail abounds as we follow David's flight and Saul's chase in 1 Samuel 21 through 26. David found refuge in various regions in and around Judah, but was in constant danger from Saul and his informers. Marking, discussion, and reading noted by numbered sites below are integrated in the following paragraphs, which summarize main themes and supplant each reading. You may want to skim the reading and concentrate on geographical information for now. As you read, write the number of the paragraph in green in the designated place on the SCA map and circle the number. All right, so Gibeah. So we want to find Gibeah here, okay? So Gibeah, if you go back to where Benjamin is, Gibeah is north of Jerusalem, but south of that there, Gibeah. So put a number 1 in green next to Gibeah. A green number 1. So this is, we just talked about it. David's involvement with the royal court began here at Gibeah in central Benjamin. These events show the favor David had with Saul's family, his officers, and the people of God. 3 times the text says the Lord was with David. 3 times the text states Saul's relationship to God. An evil spirit from God came upon him. The Lord had left him. Saul had an evil spirit from the Lord. 3 times we hear of Saul's fear of David. His jealousy grew to murderous proportions. And 3 times Saul attempts to impale David. David fled to Ramah.
He fled to where Samuel was.
He's fled to where Samuel was. Isn't that interesting? Yeah, or at least had been. So write a number 2. So go north of Gibeah, and you'll see that next kind of city there is Ramah. Put a green number 2 next to Ramah. From Gibeah to Ramah is a short walk north through central Benjamin. When David arrived, he and Samuel moved on to what is called Nahath in Ramah. This is probably not a proper name, but simply means dwelling somewhere near the city, perhaps a gathering place in a more secluded area where Samuel could retire with his disciples. Saul had no trouble finding David, but did encounter other difficulties on the way. From Ramah, David returned to his friend Jonathan, the crown prince, in or near Gibeah. Jonathan's deep commitment to David far outweighed Saul's fixation on kingdom building. David's reciprocal commitment is also felt through the rest of 1 Samuel and on into David's early reign. You remember David and Jonathan had that great friendship. So after he fled up to Ramah, and then before he fled again, he returned to Gibeah for just a time. And that's where Jonathan gives him his armor, and they exchange gifts and those things. And they move on from there. From there, he moves on to Nob. All right. So Nob is not listed on this map. But you can write a number 3 just north of Jerusalem.
Probably on the other side of Mount Scopus.
Yeah.
Which you'll see last time we saw Mount Scopus. I keep saying you'll see it, and I keep remember this, we have a different.
Yeah. So Nob is probably located near the summit of the Mount of Olives near Jerusalem, the city which was then inhabited by Jebusites. In this small sanctuary, David received supplies and the sword of Goliath, which served him well in subsequent months. An Edomite head of Saul's herdsmen informed Saul of what had happened at Nob, and Saul reacted as the men of Gibeah had centuries before, with ruthless disregard of God and man. In this frustrated quest for recognition, nothing stood in Saul's way. So circle the number 3 in red to indicate the violent massacre which took place at Nob. So this is where David is leaving. He's going there. He is in desperate need of food and supplies. The priest said, all we have here is the showbread, is the bread that's been offered, and it's only right for the priest to eat. And David said, well, I'm on a mission from God. And so the priest gave that to David and his men to eat. And And Jesus referenced that story. If you in Luke, I think we might have read it just a little bit ago, but it just said, do you not know David ate the bread that was not permitted for him to eat.
Yeah, when his disciples, when the
Pharisees are
died
upset
because
with the disciples because they're eating the grain that are there. So that's referencing this story, and that's where that took place, just outside Jerusalem. Jerusalem is not in Judahite or Israelite control at this point, but this little village of Nob where there seems to be a shrine or a temple is. Okay. Then we're going to move on to Gath. At the intersection on the west of the Shphelah. We already talked about that. So Gath, you guys everybody find that just about an inch north of the seam. Put a number 4, a green number 4 next to Gath. So David had to run from Saul. Where better to go than to his enemies, right? So he escaped from Saul in Philistine territory. The journey took David back into Judah, possibly through Bethlehem, his hometown. And along the same route he followed on his journey to meet Goliath. Follow the route from Bethlehem via Hushba, Timnah, Sokah to Gath. We kind of did that in the opposite way a little bit earlier. On the way, he had time to consider his transition from shepherd to warrior, especially as he passed through the Elah Valley. Find himself in potential trouble at Gath. His ruse allowed him to escape. And so, this isn't taking more than a day. To get from Bethlehem to the Elah Valley or Bethlehem to Gath, that's probably a 6-7 hour walk. I mean, so it's a day's walk, but it's not like it's, days and days that this is happening. He could get from Bethlehem to the Elah Valley in probably 3 or 4 hours, depending on how fast he wanted to get there. In Gath, he pretended like he was crazy, by the way, if you didn't remember that story. That's where they thought he was out of his mind, so they didn't kill him. So if you want to go back and read some of these stories in Samuel, it's kind of interesting. And then we're going to go to Adullam in the Shphelah southeast of Gath. So if you go east from Gath to Azekah, and then you see Sokah, just kind of south and east from the Sokah, not less than an inch, you'll see Adullam. Put a number 5, a green 5 next to Adullam. So from Gath, go east, you'll see Azekah, you'll see Sokah, you'll see the Elah Valley. Just south of the Elah Valley, you'll see Adullam. Put a green 5 next to Adullam. And this is what's talked about in 1 Samuel 22. Adullam is located on the eastern edge of Shphelah above the chalk moat, which can be seen on the map. There's the hard limestone and the softer rock to the Shphelah. From Adullam, David could watch the ridge routes coming from the hill country, so he could see if Saul or his men were coming to get him. Find a natural chalk moat running from the north, from Keilah by Adullam to Escala and beyond. The Judah map shows this moat in more detail, both in the north and the south. Somewhere in the Shphelah near Adullam, David came to an important conclusion, probably due to his experiences with Saul and the Philistines at Gath. He could no longer serve his people in Saul's forces, and it was only a matter of time before the Philistines again invaded Judah and Benjamin. He therefore organized his private army, a mixed bag of volunteers, like Robin Hood's band, literally. I mean, there were thieves and people that were owed money and, beggars and everything else. David's wisdom and patience were no doubt taxed during their training. So he learned how to lead men, if you think about it, during this, because he didn't have people that were trained or came from the best position or experience. He really learned how to lead people during this time. They served him well, however, and we have a list of these mighty men in their hometowns in 2 Samuel 23. All right, so that's kind of where he kind of gathered that people to himself there. Some of them included his family. Moab, number 6. So we're going way down in the bottom right part of the map. We have a blue box around Moab. Put a green number 6 by Moab. Do we not have a blue box around Moab?
We just highlighted.
That's fine too. Yes, you're right. I think we can put a blue box around it later. So, sorry, we highlighted it. You're right. I knew we did something to it. So, David's public enemy number 1. What might Saul do to get after David? We might go after his family. David thinks about this, and so where does he send his family? He sends his mom and dad to Moab. Okay? So David's concern for his mother and his father, this is number 6 on page 49. And his mother, it meant that the trip from Bethlehem to Moab was necessary. Since David's great-grandmother was Ruth, remember that story, Ruth and Boaz? She was from Moab, right? The Moabitess, and since in his service to Saul he had not been involved in any military action against Moab, he was sure he would be welcome in Moab. Although the route to Moab is not specified, it seems likely that the safest route was the long descent from Bethlehem and Tekoa through the wilderness, which David knew well, and the steep path leading down to En-Gedi. From there they could follow the shore of the Dead Sea, past the large isolated rock platform known as the Stronghold, today that's Masada, and cross to Moab. So kind of would cross across this little area here, and maybe in a boat or something like that. Right. So that's Moab. So David sends his family there. And then in 22 verses 4 and 5, the stronghold. So if you see, so right where that thing juts into the Red Sea or the Dead Sea, if you go across onto the Israelite side, from there you'll see Masada, the stronghold. Right, we're going to put a green number 7 by that. And that's the Masada that's still around today, the great fortress, mountaintop fortress that's there. A lot of stories in history had some things, especially with the revolt. That's the last place of Jewish revolt. The plan is that we'll go there. It's pretty amazing. They have you can ride a gondola up to the top, because it's just, and then we walk out and see the things at the top that are there. So, all right. Returning from Moab, David went to the stronghold or fortress, in Hebrew, Metsuda. Writing in the decades after the close of the book of Acts, Josephus Flavius called this Masada, King's Herod's magnificent stronghold palace, later used by Jewish rebels in their stand against mighty Rome. The stronghold's natural defenses provided David with the imagery which he and others would later incorporate into their spiritual verse of praise. Psalm 18, for example, declares, "The Lord is my sharp crag, my Metsuda, stronghold, my place of escape. My God is my rock. I will take refuge in him. He makes my legs like those of the deer, and on the heights he enables me to stand. You broaden the footpath under me so that my ankles do not twist." Compare the imageries in Psalm 31, 71, 91, 144. After his departure from the stronghold, David went into the forest of Hereth, a region yet to be identified. We're not sure where that is. Or you might think of the Psalm that we get a mighty fortress from, right? A mighty fortress is our God, right? A stronghold, an ever-present help in trouble, right? These are the images that are there. We're looking at Keilah in the Shephelah south of Adullam. So we had the find your green number 5 again. And if you go just south of that, you'll see Keilah. Put an 8 by that. So news from the Shephelah of Judah confirmed David's fears that the Philistines were beginning to move again. So he heard about how they were moving up into the hill country. Now Saul is still king, but they're still his people. And so he's worried about that. His vigilant defense force was ready. We know that it was April or May, since the people of Keilah were harvesting and threshing grain in nearby fields. The Philistines were invading the Shephelah and forcibly taking the processed grain. The Philistines advanced beyond Sukkah, their front line in the Goliath episode, and south via the Elah Valley along the Chakmot to Keilah. In spite of the danger of being intercepted by Saul, David knew he would have to move quickly. Did he use all of his leadership qualities to muster his checkered militia? Some did not want to go on this mission. If caught, they would face criminal charges plus suffer the consequences of following David, a rebel leader regarded by many as a fugitive from justice. In the end, the band left the wilderness, crossed the hill country of Judah, and descended into the Shephelah. David's inquiries in the text reveal an interesting aspect. Twice he asked of the Lord if he should try to relieve Keilah. Twice he asked if the people there would turn him over to Saul. This reminds the reader that the Lord was with David, and equally as important that David trusted the Lord. All right. Let's end there for today. The Wilderness of Ziph. On page 50. We'll start there next time. Wilderness of Ziph on page 50 as we're marking here as well. So, all right. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end here, and then we'll close